So what are we going to do with all these veggies that we just chopped? Well, 3 of them, I'm going to show you how to make a classic mirepoix. So a mirepoix is just a flavor base, right? It's sauteed onions with carrots and celery, and when cooked together, they brown and they get sweet and get like, you know, nuanced in flavor. They get kind of savory. They develop some like beautiful meaty notes. They're so good. They're a great base for soups, for sauces, for a lot of different things. So let's get started. So we've got our hot pan here, and we're going to use some olive oil. There you go. You need a good amount because we don't want it to burn, but it doesn't need to be so much that it's like excessively oily. You can also use butter. Butter is great for a mirepoix, but you have to keep in mind that butter burns really easily. So the whole point of like developing these flavors is through browning, and butter doesn't really like to brown so much. Like it goes from brown to burnt really quickly. So I tend to stick to like oils like olive oil or sunflower oil. Grapeseed oil is really good as well. So we've got our oil. It's cooked up, or it's heating up. It's nice and shimmery. I can see it's got like the little waves at the beach, right? You can see the surface of it starting to ripple. It's getting a little bit thinner than it was when I first poured it in. So we're gonna add our onions. Whew. I finally composed myself after chopping the onions. Took me a few minutes. Ugh. Like I still have my eye makeup on. So these onions are still going to be strong when you put them in, but it'll only take a few minutes for them to cook down. So what we want to do is cook them down till they're just beginning to brown, and then we're going to add our other vegetables. A good mirepoix can take a few minutes. Like the goal is to like heat it slowly, but not so slowly so that it doesn't brown. So our burner is at about a 4 or a 5 right now, and depending on your particular cooktop, you might want to turn it up a little bit if it's taking a long time. So we've got our onions here, and what they're doing right now is they're cooking off all their internal moisture. Once that internal moisture cooks off, then they're going to start to brown. Alrighty, we're just beginning to get the early signs of browning, which is good. So we're going to add our celery, and we're going to add our carrots because we want them to all brown together. Toss those in. Now this is where it's important for everything to be roughly the same size, right? Like you'll see there's some variance and difference here. It's not like a huge deal if like some pieces are bigger than others, that's fine. But the goal is to get them to be as close to the same size as possible so that they cook evenly. And the interesting thing about a mirepoix is that it's got the same basic ratio every single time, right? So this is a classic French mirepoix. And the ratio is 2 parts onion, 1 part celery, 1 part carrots. So in this case, I've got a little 1 cup of onions, and then I have a half a cup of celery and carrots that I've put in here. And this is the same if you go up or down, like it would be 2 cups onions, 1 cup celery, 1 cup carrots. Now, if you're in New Orleans and you're cooking with what they call the Holy Trinity, which is their version of a mirepoix, and instead of carrots, they use bell peppers, green bell peppers, in fact. And so a mirepoix for them would be 2 part onions, 1 part celery, 1 part chopped bell pepper, all in the same size and shape, ideally. So we've got these guys cooking down. It smells amazing. What we want to happen is caramelization, right? All of these vegetables, every single vegetable in this pan right now is high in sugar. And so what we're doing is we want to develop those sugars into caramels, right? We do that by browning them together on a hot pan. And that only happens where they're in contact with the pan. So that's why it's really important that we make sure that we let it sit and let that contact with the pan do its job. So all those sugars from the vegetables caramelize. And I can smell them starting to go. Like they're starting to smell sweet and a little caramely and really good. So I think we're well on our way. So we've got some good browning going on. And you can see here that it's starting to turn brown on the pan, and it's looking great. So what we want to do is make sure we scrape those bits with the spatula to get up as much as we can so they kind of work up into the vegetables. And if we need to, we can add a little bit more oil to moisturize that area. Like every pan and every cooktop are going to have hot spots and cold spots, right? And you need to pay attention to the hot spots on your particular stove and in that particular pan, because those are going to be the areas that are most likely to burn. So if you know where that is in that pan on that stovetop, just keep an eye on it and kind of scrape it more often if you can. And it's also good to pile like wet vegetables up onto that one spot, because the moisture from the vegetables as they cook will steam out that burny part. So it's important to mention here that for some things you actually don't want to brown your mirepoix. Like if you're using your mirepoix for a white soup, like a clam chowder or like a potato leek soup, you actually don't want to brown your mirepoix because it'll turn your white soup brown, right? But the problem is then you don't have that beautiful caramelized flavor. You still have like the beautiful flavors of the vegetables that have been cooked down and sweetened a little bit, but you're missing out on that like super sweet, super complex caramelized like nuance that I'm looking for. So I like to make sure they brown a little bit, even if it sacrifices like a hair of the white of the soup. I don't think it's that big a deal. I think for me, flavor is way more important. Alrighty, our mirepoix is looking really good. We've got some good browning in here. We've got some good color on these vegetables. They're cooked through. Now here's the deal with the mirepoix. Like we could actually cook this a lot longer. Like we could cook it low and slow and essentially caramelize it like caramelized onions. Like we could cook this for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. Like develop some incredibly nuanced flavors, some beautiful browning. Like the whole thing would be brown and it would essentially be a jam texture and it would be a super flavor bomb in your dish. But the reality is we're home cooking, right? Not a lot of people have time for that. So we're gonna call this done. What I'm gonna do with this is I'm actually gonna turn this into a soup, or maybe I'll turn it into a sauce. I don't know. I'm gonna list some suggestions below this video.